Okay, so let's jump right in by asking a really fundamental question. What does it actually take to survive on the outside? Before a developing fetus can survive outside the highly controlled safety of the womb, it has to undergo this dramatic, incredibly fast-paced period of final testing and fine-tuning. Going from a cozy, aquatic, temperature-controlled environment where nutrients and oxygen are literally delivered on demand, to the cold, bright, gravity-heavy outside world, that's a massive physiological shock. So this final trimester isn't just about getting bigger. It's an absolutely critical rehearsal for total biological independence.
To make this complex biological journey easy to follow, here is our game plan for this explainer. We're going to look at the final gestational stretch, the rapid growth and weight gain phase, finalizing major organ maturation, gaining biological independence, and then we'll wrap it all up with a quick summary.
All right, let's kick things off with our first topic, the final gestational stretch, and see exactly where the third trimester fits into the overall gestational journey.
When we look at the whole gestation period, there's a really fascinating contrast between the phases. Gestation is roughly split into 3 12-week sections, right? And each has a highly specific biological priority. The first trimester is a critical time for foundational development, laying the vital blueprints and forming basic organ systems from tiny cell clusters. Then, the second trimester is dominated by general development and changing body proportions. But the third trimester? It has a completely different job description. It's characterized almost entirely by rapid growth and final maturation. The blueprint is already built, so now it's all about preparing the body for opening night.
Safely enclosed within the compound amniochorionic membrane, the fetus is perfectly protected to undergo this final sprint. Basically, think of this membrane as a tough, fluid-filled shock absorber. It's created when two vital outer and inner layers fuse together during the second trimester. Because the heavy lifting of building the foundational architecture, like the bones, the basic organ structures, the limbs, because all that is largely complete, the fetus can actually shift its biological energy. It takes all the resources it was using for basic formation and channels them completely into dramatic growth and internal refinement, all within this secure, pressurized space.
And that brings us perfectly to our second section, rapid growth and weight gain. Let's look at the sheer, incredible scale of physical growth happening in these final few months. So during this final stretch, even though the rate of overall proportional growth actually starts to slow down a bit, the sheer mass and weight gain is the greatest of the entire pregnancy. Get this, the fetus gains a staggering 2.6 kilograms. That's roughly 5.7 pounds, just in these last 3 months alone. To put that massive physical undertaking into perspective, that's literally like building the mass of an entire heavy bag of flour from scratch, cell by cell, in just 12 weeks. The metabolic energy required from both the mother and the fetus to pull this off is just absolutely astounding.
So you might be wondering, where exactly is all this new weight coming from? Well, this massive weight gain is largely driven by the rapid deposition of adipose tissue. Adipose tissue is essentially specialized connective tissue where fat is stored. Piling on this fat isn't just about getting chubby. It is absolutely crucial for survival. First, it provides necessary thermal insulation for the baby once it leaves that warm 98.6-degree environment of the womb. And second, it acts as a highly concentrated, vital energy reserve to sustain the newborn through those really strenuous first few days of life on the outside, right before feeding routines are fully established.
To really highlight that extraordinary growth, just consider this stark contrast. At the very start of the third trimester, right around week 27, the fetus weighs roughly 0.6 kilograms, so just over half a kilo. It's still quite small and fragile, but by the time it reaches the 40-week mark, it hits an average term weight of 3.2 kilograms. It literally more than quintuples its weight. This rapid physical transformation means space becomes incredibly tight inside the womb, which prompts the fetus to curl up into that classic fetal position because, well, it's quite literally running out of room during this final rehearsal.
Moving on to our third section, finalizing major organ maturation. Because as we're about to see, this trimester isn't just about putting on external weight. The internal systems are simultaneously undergoing a remarkably complex final rehearsal.
Early in the third trimester, most of the fetus's major organ systems transition from merely existing to becoming fully functional. Take the lungs, for example. They don't just grow larger. They undergo absolutely crucial internal structural changes. They develop millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli. And critically, they begin producing a substance called surfactant. Surfactant acts kind of like a biological soap. It coats the inside of the lungs and prevents those tiny air sacs from collapsing and sticking together when the baby takes its very first breath of air instead of fluid. Meanwhile, the eyelids, which had been fused shut to protect the developing eyes, now open and close, and the eyes can actually detect light filtering through the maternal abdomen. Crucial endocrine players, like the pituitary gland, fire up to regulate growth and metabolism. The kidneys become fully operational, complex filtration systems. In male fetuses, the testes descend into the scrotum. And perhaps most astonishingly, we see incredibly complex neurodevelopmental milestones in the brain. At 28 and 36 weeks, the relatively smooth surface of the brain begins to fold into complex grooves and ridges. This rapidly increases the surface area and forms billions of new neural connections that pave the way for complex autonomous behaviors. It's a real game changer.
All of this complex internal maturation, from the surfactant in the lungs to the rapid neural folding in the brain, serves one primary life-saving goal, which brings us to our fourth section, gaining biological independence. Okay, here is a really fascinating and honestly slightly messy biological fact that perfectly highlights this newfound independence. As those newly mature kidneys start to function, they begin actively filtering the fetus's blood. And the byproduct of this? The fetus actually begins producing its own urine. And because it's enclosed in that fluid-filled shock absorber we talked about earlier, the fetus essentially urinates right back into the amniotic fluid. It then swallows that fluid, processes it through its digestive tract, and filters it through the kidneys again in a continuous, active biological loop. It's a huge milestone because it proves the fetus's internal plumbing and filtration system are fully online and working independently. Now, this high level of biological independence carries profound medical implications in the real world, because these major organ systems, especially the lungs producing that crucial surfactant, and the kidneys filtering waste, because they become functionally viable early in the third trimester, an infant born 1 to 2 months prematurely actually has a reasonable chance of survival outside the womb. Modern medicine certainly helps a ton, but it relies entirely on the fact that these underlying biological systems have already completed their primary maturation phases. They're prepared enough to sustain life, even if the baby hasn't quite finished their final external physical bulking up yet.
Let's bring all of this together in our final section, third trimester summary, and take a quick look back at this miraculous final stage of human gestation. When we look at the overarching goals of the third trimester, its biological priorities are perfectly divided into two parallel tracks. On one side, we have vital external growth. This is that rapid gain of 2.6 kilograms primarily through the essential storage of adipose fat tissue, transforming a fragile half-kilo fetus into a robust newborn with an average term weight of 3.2 kilos. On the other side, and honestly equally important, is the internal maturation. We're talking lungs producing life-saving surfactant, kidneys actively filtering and recycling amniotic fluid, eyes opening to the world, and the brain dramatically increasing in complex neural folds. It is an incredibly busy, perfectly orchestrated 3 months of biological fine-tuning.
And this leaves us with a really profound thought to end on today. If a developing human body can successfully finalize all of these wildly complex, life-sustaining systems in just 3 short months, completely in the dark, before we are even born, what other unseen, highly orchestrated biological miracles is the human body performing right now as you sit here listening to this explainer? Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep wondering, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.